Hi, everyone. Welcome to Transformer Talks with Alibaba.com. I am not John Kaplan, but this is Erica Chen from the Alibaba.com team dialing in from Brooklyn, New York. And joining us today is Eytan Buchman from Freightos, dialing in from Jerusalem, Israel. Eytan, welcome.
Thank you so much. Wow, what a privilege to be here.
Eytan, could you maybe tell the audience a little bit about what Freightos is and who you are and how you ended up there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think a lot of people, when they're kids, they dream about becoming astronauts and firefighters, and very few people dream about freight and technology. To be honest, I kind of stumbled into it. Right now, I'm the chief marketing officer of a company called Freightos. Freightos is a digital freight booking platform that basically connects importers and exporters with freight companies and with carriers. And as I said, this was kind of something that I stumbled into. I've always been very, very big on storytelling, and I love being able to come up with concepts and find the right way to communicate them. And I spent a while in the government in kind of spokesperson's roles and strategic planning, and I always had this little bit of a tech bug. So at a certain point, I decided to get out from there and just reached out to a bunch of different people, spoke to a bunch of people in the tech ecosystem, sat down with the CEO of Freightos when we were just like 4 or 5 people. And I loved the idea. I loved kind of this concept of taking the curtain back and seeing how everything behind the scenes functions. And that like paradigm shift of when you look at the bottom of a cup or a computer or a phone and it says made in wherever, and like unpacking that into everything that it is. So I've been at Freightos since. It's been 8 phenomenal years. And I think, not to spoil it, but one of the best parts so far has been working together with the Alibaba crew on our joint partnership for, working a global freight platform that supports the Alibaba, incredible Alibaba ecosystem. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I love the idea of sort of going behind the curtains, right? As a B2B e-commerce platform, that's what we do here at Alibaba.com. And actually, one of the things that we've been talking about a lot, right, is the rise in e-commerce and the rise in entrepreneurship coming out of the last year and a half, 2 years. And freight is a big part of that. I'm curious, Eytan, what are you seeing in the space, sort of with the growing demands on e-commerce, and what are the trends that you're observing?
Yeah. Oh God. I mean, there's so much to unpack there. You mentioned SMB or small businesses and entrepreneurs. And first of all, I think this whole space, not just in the past 2 years, the past 10, 15 years has been so magical because these barriers keep on getting taken down. Like it just becomes easier to source and becomes easier to do these things that people used to not be able to do. You used to have a connection or used to know the right person or travel. And the fact that those barriers have been steadily coming down, the knowledge barriers, has been incredible. And then I think over the past year or two, that's changed dramatically, where suddenly there's this huge barrier. We're all are living this barrier of kind of working from our homes in Jerusalem or in Brooklyn, and it suddenly makes everything so much more difficult. But the same ingenuity that has been driving a lot of entrepreneurship just has really kicked in. Like I saw this especially with small and mid-sized companies, where you have large enterprise organizations that were struggling to adapt, and these small entrepreneurs can turn on a dime and say, well, yeah, I'm going to shift over to importing masks, or I'm going to shift over to sourcing more garden furniture because people are going to start working on that. And I think that agility that kind of helped them build their business pre-COVID has really continued to be a major driver over the past year and a half or 2 years.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing, right, how digitization is sort of doing wonders in the space. I'm curious, for a platform like Freightos, how is that opening doors to small businesses, and especially to these sort of newer e-commerce retail businesses from around the world?
Yeah, so I mean, so similar to Alibaba, but maybe many years later, just where we kind of came in. International freight is something that is super complicated, and we're for people that aren't the ordained, that haven't kind of dealt with international freight so far, their experience with shipping is you order something online and it shows up on your door, and you never think of all the different players that are involved in each individual shipment, and just the number, the math behind it. So if you have 8 different people or companies that are involved in a shipment, say an ocean line or in trucking companies on both sides and customs brokerages, if you only have eight different companies involved, and each one of those is perfect 98% of the time. That still means that 12% of all shipments are going to go wrong. And just like being able to coordinate all those different players and orchestrate it and find the right ones is so challenging. And that's where our vision at Freightos has always been, to make that global freight component frictionless, to try to recreate that really, really easy experience. And it's been really, really rewarding since we launched about 5 years ago. But the past 2 years has just been, it's been a ride. I mean, you see those barriers are coming back up in terms of cost and in terms of finding the right provider, and being able to help facilitate that has just really been enormously gratifying.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And what I think is so interesting, right, is that if you think about something like shipping and logistics, it's often being thought of as like a means to an end, right? It's just to get something from A to B, and no one really focuses on it until something goes wrong, as we have seen in the past few months with the supply chain disruption. I'm curious, do you think businesses, or small and medium-sized businesses especially, can actually turn shipping and logistics into a business advantage if they do it well? What have
Yeah,
you seen?
it's such a great question. We when we work with enterprise organizations, like large multinational Fortune 500 companies, the supply chain professionals inside will sometimes refer to what they call logistics earned income, where ultimately at the end of the day, you're any entrepreneur knows what their costs are. They know what their costs of goods sold are. Every single time you manage to lower your costs, your logistics costs a tiny bit, that changes your margins. And as a small business, and I said this before, that can turn on a dime and suddenly find another provider, or find another company to source, or work with another branch of their sourcing agent, being able to shift around and preserve that agility, whether it's on the SKUs, on the lines that they're importing, or the way that they're importing it. I think that flexibility, that's the SMB jujitsu. Their weakness and strength is being able to, small enough that they're small, but small enough that they can move really, really quickly. And that's been fun to see. I think very early on, everybody right now is looking at the ships and looking at congestion at ports, and why freight prices are going up so high right now. But if you zoom back to the very beginning of the crisis of COVID, in March and April of 2020, air cargo prices, not ocean prices, shot up, and we forget about it. Again, another reason that freight is in the background, but the same passenger airplanes that we all fly on carry half of all air cargo right under the deck, right? So while somebody's leaning back and shoving their tray in your face, there's pallets of goods that are kind of a little bit more comfortable right under you. And as soon as those passenger jets stopped flying because of COVID restrictions, suddenly 50% of all air cargo capacity in the world just dropped out. And that means that prices increased like crazy. They went up like 400% in the first month or two. And what we started to see is very, very smart business people who aren't freight professionals, but with the right tools from the right companies. And I will not say the Freightos is the only one. There's so many companies that support small businesses right now for sourcing, for freight, and the small companies that were able to say, well, it does, because I'm empowered to make the decisions myself, I can send only half of my shipment by air and the rest by ocean, and I can split it up, and I can make up these decisions, and I can make very, very rapid decisions without needing to go through these long enterprise processes. And that was just really, really fun to watch.
That's amazing. And I love how you were describing it as small business jujitsu, which I think so aptly captures sort of the spirit of small businesses and entrepreneurs. To those of you who just tuned in, welcome to Alibaba.com Transformer Talks. Joining us today from Jerusalem is Eytan Buchman, a CMO of Freightos, a digital freight platform that is transforming really how small businesses can tap into the global freight shipping market. Eytan, I'm curious. I've been actually reading this book called The Box. I don't know if you've read it. I'm sure you have, right? And it's a
Yeah,
fascinating book that sort of talks about how the invention of the container has actually sort of revolutionized, right, the world economy by making shipping a lot more affordable and easy, which is fascinating. And really, the history of the container isn't that long if you think about it. So
right.
curious what you think the next big thing in shipping or in global logistics might be.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's a wonderful book. I think the the canon for people that are starting in international freight is The Box, and that's a wonderful book. And there's another one called 90% of Everything by Rose George, which I'm sure you've read as well. And it's so I think kind of get goosebumps when you look at those books and you understand how big they are and the scale of these things. And asking where international freight is going in general, it's such a good question because you can look at the trajectory and The Box, that book shows it well, but really anyone who's been in logistics for a while, when you explore the trajectory of what's happened since the container was invented in the 1950s, what you see is greater economies of scale, where we're starting first with very, very small ships and then start scaling up. And you can actually look at the names of different classes of ships that they've built since then. There was a Panama ship and then a Panamax, which is as large as it can fit in the Panama Canal. And slowly they've been making larger and larger ships and just scaling up, ramping up the economies of scale to the point where a ship today can hold 23,000 20-foot equivalent units. That's enough that you could probably on one ship fit a mattress for every resident of New York. So these are just like these giant moving cities of goods. And that's the direction that things have gone so far. And it's not a hugely digital play to date. It's just, we used to be able to put 2 containers on a ship. Now it's put 4, and now it's put 8 and 16. Where I think things are moving right now is ocean liners and airlines are getting much better at getting nuanced about their data and what kind of availability they have, how much space is available on a ship, and then slowly moving that out towards their freight customers, the freight forwarders, and then onto the importers and exporters. And once you can unpack better capacity visualization, like understand how much space do I have in this ship and where do I need to place this container because it's going to make a call at the port of Long Beach before it moves on to Tacoma, for example, that unlocks a lot of opportunities. And I know this is getting super logisticsy geeky, but the equivalent is on air travel, the difference between every seat is identical and a business class or first class, where you might need your goods right now. You don't want to put it on an airplane, but maybe you can get better placement within the ship so that it gets unloaded first and you can shave 2 or 3 days off. Having that type of visibility, I think, is a game changer, and it also will lower prices. The craziest statistic that I know in air cargo is that the load factor, the amount of seats that are filled for passengers, is typically in the 80 to 90% range. So airlines are usually, and I think that most people that fly probably feel like it's 100% because they always have 16 elbows in their laps. But the cargo capacity in air cargo is only about 50%. So only about 50% of all air cargo space is actually used. And that means that we're paying double as much as we need to pay for air cargo. And it means that there's more carbon emissions than we need to have. So once you can digitize the capacity and provide that directly to customers, it means that air cargo prices for all of us will just drop dramatically. And I think that's like the next big thing. It's not more and more and more. It's how can we get better, smarter, more efficient use out of what we already have.
Awesome. And I love how it's not just lowering the cost of shipping, but it's also lowering the environmental cost that sort of together we have right in the world. Eytan, shifting gears a little bit into sort of supply chain resiliency, really. We hear a lot of talk and a lot of sort of fear and worries, right, around the upcoming sort of holiday shopping season. We hear and see that there are a lot of ships that are docked outside of the Long Beach port. With all the disruptions out there, I'm curious, like, what are the advice or tips that you might have for retailers that are looking to weather this storm? Because a lot of the small businesses that are tuning in here are retailers.
Yeah, I mean, there's no silver bullet here. This is absolutely challenging times and really unprecedented times. I think that it's probably not of a ton of comfort for businesses to know that this is probably a once in a lifetime incident. We've seen ocean freight prices climb from about $1,800 for a container from Southeast Asia to the United States to $22,000, $23,000, and they're already very high at this point. If your container hasn't been loaded onto a ship, it's probably not going to make it for holiday season. So, I think everybody has been living those challenges today, and it's probably not going to go away immediately. These are it takes a long time to turn around a container ship. Freight moves a little bit slow. I think the most important thing that I've learned so far is look as far ahead as you can, right? There's a lot of dependability in a calendar. It's not incredibly difficult to know when is Chinese New Year going to come, right? You can look at your calendar in the beginning of every single year and plan out when is the Chinese New Year, so I know that freight prices are going to go up right before and then drop right after. When is the mid-season peak season going to kick in? When will actual peak seasons kick in? When will there be products that are shipped, for Apple launches and the next Xbox launch? And how can I control my air cargo around then? So the first thing is kind of what they teach you at driving school, which is don't always look at the car in front of you. Look five, look six, look 10 cars in front of you. And I think the second thing is just avoiding making binary decisions. That there's always a lot of fluidity in how much do I ship? Do I need to ship it all right now? Can I ship some of my goods by express and then stage some by air and then stage some by ocean? And then do I also need to source them all from the same company? Or can I start looking at different vendors that I can work with in different countries? Maybe I pay a little bit more for inventory storage closer to where you're selling and stock up there when demand is weak. So some of that requires a little bit of capital up front, which is scary, but the opportunity cost is even higher if you don't take advantage of those. So I think balancing those two together is probably the most effective supply chain management technique. I would also warn, I think this might be a little bit premature where we are in the cycle, but warn against kind of shifting your entire logistics world view around what's happening right now. Because it was only 5 years ago that ocean freight prices were so low that ocean liners were going out of business, like Hanjin, a top 10 global ocean liner that declared bankruptcy. So I think reading the market, staying informed, looking ahead, and kind of making decisions that are a little bit graded is probably the best way to weather this and succeed afterwards.
Thank you for that. There's a lot of really good advice in there. And Eytan, you've already shared a ton of data, and I'm always like hungry for more. But given where you sit, right, Freightos sort of sits in the middle of a huge array of shipping data. I'm curious if there's anything interesting that you can share with us, or
Yeah.
any sort of exciting trends coming up that we might want to hear about.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the trends, unfortunately, that we've been tracking recently have been pretty bleak. So we do spend a lot of extra time looking into the trends, other trends that we can come up with. I think one thing that I really have, appreciated seeing over the last year is we've been running these quarterly surveys across a lot of our small and mid-sized business owners, asking them how they're dealing with the supply chain crisis. And the most important question that we asked initially was how hard are you getting hit by the increasing prices? And of course, they're all getting hit pretty hard. And then asking them a little bit about how they're balancing whether they're taking a hit on their margins or whether they're increasing costs for their customers. And initially, as probably behooves a small business, many of them were taking the hit themselves in order to keep customers happy, which is really hard to do. And of course, it's not sustainable. It's right the your number one job as an entrepreneur is to stay in business, not necessarily to always keep your customer happy at your own expense. And I've started to see over the past 6 months or so, we've been running these surveys regularly, that more and more importers are increasing prices slightly, and it seems like they're still, based on the cadence of imports that they're making, they're still doing okay with that. And I think that might be a function of the fact that prices are increasing for a lot of people across the ecosystem, and that you'll see some large big box retailers doing the same thing. And that means that there's a little bit more tolerance to kind of roll some of the costs into the final cost of goods, which is encouraging. The other thing that we're seeing, which is super encouraging, is what I talked about a little bit before in terms of air cargo capacity utilization. So we're seeing airlines, especially, just adopt digital channels far more than they ever have. And I think that we're going to be shocked by how fast all air cargo airlines will go online and start selling. And I think that the costs are really going to drop fairly dramatically, particularly because, at least in some places, the COVID restrictions are starting to ease a little bit. And that means there's more passenger flights in the sky. People are flying around a little bit more. So I think, and especially right now, you can see, even though peak season ocean freight is over and we're starting to get into air cargo pricing, prices have not spiked up yet. It seems like there still is a little bit of room in the air cargo market to support imports right now.
That's great. Thank you for that. And speaking of sort of small businesses, right, absorbing the hit in terms of rising freight and input costs. Alibaba.com, we recognize that sort of access to capital and access to cash is a big need amongst our small business customers. And we actually launched an Alibaba.com grants program back in September. And I'm happy to let everyone know that it's still going on. Applications are still open. And so please, for small businesses out there with an innovative product idea or an innovative go-to-market strategy, please follow the URL that is on your screen and submit your application for a chance to receive $10,000 in cash. So we're committing $500,000 to support small businesses in need. So please follow the URL. Applications are open until October 21st. Eytan, thank you for sharing all your insights and tips. Do you have any sort of parting thoughts for the audience before we conclude?
Well, I mean, first of all, that's a fantastic initiative with the grant. So real kudos to Alibaba for that. I think one thing that's really helped me a lot throughout my professional career has really been not being scared of just going out there and finding information for myself. It's how I got my current job. It's how a lot of my career development has happened. And I think in the logistics space as well, it's not so hard to empower yourself with the relevant information. The information that analysts are looking at and that the New York Times are looking at or the Wall Street Journal are sources that most of us can get to by ourselves. Freight prices are pretty available online. Congestion at ports is pretty available. Empower yourself. Spend a little bit of time looking around online because there's so much information there, and it's not so difficult to ramp yourself up to be able to understand that and start drawing your own conclusions.
Thank you. Information is power, and we're delighted to be partnering with Freightos and Eytan and the team to make it more accessible. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Eytan, for joining us and for sharing all your insights. Everyone have a good day and see you at the next one.